Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another video right here on Free Will Photos. Today, what I'm going to be doing is working on this photo of some flowers moving between ON1 Photo Raw 2024.3 to Luminar Neo 1.19. Now, I am using a beta version of Luminar Neo, so please just keep that in mind. But the workflow should be pretty much the same. Now, you'll see that I have to use a workaround. That's just an issue with my computer, but life goes on. So I want to show you, if you are having the same issue, one, how you can do the workaround to jump between ON1 and Luminar. But if you have Luminar or any other plugin installed, what you can do is just come up to Layer and then go to Filters, and you can click on Skyloom Software. And if I hit Luminar Neo, you'll see that it's going to build something over here, but it doesn't actually take me to the software so I can edit the file. And that's perfectly fine because I do have a workaround. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But I did want to showcase that because if you are not having the same issue as me, you'll be able to access your version of the plugin. It should just pop up. And I do have Luminar open, so here it is, it's open, but it's not actually pulling that information. It's making the new layer here in ON1, but it didn't actually send this particular image over to Luminar. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this because I don't need it. So if you click the little hamburger menu or the 3-line menu, you can just scroll down and click on delete layer, and then that layer goes away. So first things first, what do I like to do when I edit a photo inside of ON1? Well, since the 2024 release and a few tweaks of Brilliance AI, I like to use Brilliance AI on all of my images. Whenever I'm working in ON1, this just seems to give me a really good starting point that I may have to tweak based off of where I want to go. And I guess now is a good time to say you got to have a vision. So what I want to do is brighten up this image and then soften it a little bit. And I want to do a lot of the heavy effects inside of Luminar, but I love the base edit that I can get inside of ON1 with Brilliance AI, which is the reason why I use it. So it looks like it's done. And this just did a very subtle job. Now, again, this is a starting point. So what I may have to do is push up on the amount here. I normally have it set to 70, and I feel like the photo is just a little too dark. I'm gonna click on levels just to see what my histogram has. Yeah, so I'm missing information all the way over here on the right hand side. So that tells me I need to come down here to tone and color, and I really need to work on this. One of the ways that I would do that is first starting with my camera profile. Usually portrait does a pretty good job at opening up those tones on the far right side. But it doesn't seem to have done that in this case. So I'm just going to cycle through these really quickly to see which ones will get me in the ballpark, which it doesn't look like any of these are going to do that. So what I'm going to do is go with ON1 portrait, and then I'm going to increase my exposure. And as you can see, as soon as I start to pull up on my exposure, this histogram, it starts to move closer to the right. Now, I don't want to push it all the way to the right. I do like the mysterious dark background here. So I'm going to kind of leave that, or darker background, I should say. I'm going to kind of leave that where it is. But what I can also do is push my midtones. So if I pull to the left, you can see that histogram is moving to the left. And if I pull my midtones to the right, well, it's moving towards those brighter tones on the right side of my histogram. Okay, maybe something like that. So after I have my midtones adjusted the way that I probably want them to, now I can work on my white point, and that's just going to pull out more information in those really bright pixels. And holding down the J key, I can see that I'm not actually clipping, and I'm so far away from the right side of the histogram that clipping probably wouldn't happen anyway, so I'm not overly concerned about that. So now that I have the base image the way that I want, here's the before. It was dark. I shot this underexposed, not necessarily intentional. It just happened that way with the settings that I had, and then I needed to pull out that information. This is one of the reasons why shooting in RAW is so powerful. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and hit the check mark. All right. I'm going to hit the check mark because I want to send this over to Luminar Neo. Now, remember, I have to use the workaround method that I was just telling you about. This is a photo that I edited purely in black or in ON1, but this is the photo that we're actually working on. So what I'm going to do is right click on this image, and my computer is going to think through for a second, and then it will give me my pop-up menu. After my computer thought itself through, finally the pop-up menu came up. Hopefully you don't have these issues. But what we're going to do is come down to the very bottom of this menu, essentially, and we're going to select the Send to Other Application option. Now, of course, I also have Send to Luminar Neo sitting right here, so I could click this one. But I want to show you, in the event that you don't have your application available in this menu, that you can navigate to it. So if I click on Send to Other Application, it's going to bring up a search box, which is right here. Now I have all of the items inside of my downloads folder, or at least this version, because I haven't moved this version over to my application folder on the Mac for just really laziness, if I'm being honest. But I'm going to go ahead and click open. And what that's going to do is give me this dialog box. Now, you may or may not be familiar with this, but it's going to create a file for me to edit inside of Luminar. Now, Luminar, it can accept RAW, TIFF, and JPEG files. So I like to export TIFF with the Adobe RGB 1998 color space. Now, I do that because it's fairly universal across all devices. So if I ever have to work on a device that can't really show the Pro RGB color space, then I am still going to be able to do this. All right. Now I send it TIFF with no layers because all I really need is the edited version, plus there's no layers to really work with. So all is well. Now, if you just wanted to edit the original, you could do so by clicking the Edit Original. This will give you a version of the file that does not have any of your ON1 edits. I personally don't want to do that. I want to edit a copy of the photo, so that way I'm preserving the edits that I made inside of ON1 by themselves, and then I'm creating the copy version that I'm going to be able to use here in a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on edit, and this is going to send me over to Luminar Neo once my computer thinks itself through and pushes that TIFF file that I just created into the software. So once that loads in, we'll jump over to Luminar Neo so I can take the edit that much further. Okay, so here we are inside of Luminar Neo. That took quite some time on my computer, but I digress. Here we are with the project or the file inside of Luminar, and it's time to get editing. Now, one of the things that I can do, because I don't necessarily want to make this a Luminar tutorial, I just kind of wanted to show the workaround of moving between ON1 to Luminar. So I'm going to use a preset. Now, there's this nature field up here at the top, and I think that this would fit for, you know, a nature type of effect. So we're going to go ahead and let these kind of load in, and we'll see how they impact the image once they are all loaded in. Okay, so all of the presets in the nature collection have loaded in, and I'm not entirely sure if this is a collection that comes with Luminar, because sadly I don't use it as frequently as I probably ought to. But it's still something that I think that you'll get the benefit of looking at, even if it's not a part of the default collection. And if anyone knows the answer to that, let me know in the comment section. So there's this black and white option for nature, but I'm not a huge fan of that. Sunny small, not so much. Micro world, no, not really. Let's see, distinctive drops. That would probably be really good if there was water drops on this, but there aren't. Best close-up and distinctive drops really seem to be the same. And then of course there's Arctic autumns. I think the one that's going to look the best on this is really sunny small. Yeah, I'll go with sunny small. So you click it, and then I can just pull down on the opacity here. And I think somewhere around 56 is probably appropriate. Now, if I needed to or wanted to, I could come in here to click on edit, and I could really go to town. I could see what is being used. So right here they have mood, which is really just a LUT simulator. And then of course they have super contrast, enhance AI, structure AI, and then a develop preset or module in the preset that I selected. But if I wanted to, I could add more to it using the various tools inside of Luminar Neo. But again, I don't want to make this a Luminar Neo tutorial. So what I will do, just to make this look a little bit different, is we'll come to landscape, click on landscape. I'm going to throw in some golden hour because I think that that's going to help with making this look, you know, just that much more lively, right? And I could have done this in ON1, but I just want to show the workflow, because sometimes maybe you want to come in and use some of the newer tools that are built into Luminar Neo, but your main digital asset manager is ON1. That's the reason why I'm showing this workaround in this video. But if you're using ON1 and you go through the layers pane, it'll just jump you straight into Luminar Neo. You can use whatever tools you need, and then it'll bring it back as a layer inside of ON1 for you. So you wouldn't even have to do the workaround that I did with the whole go to the browse, right click, and all that good stuff. But I want to show you how you can get essentially the same effect. So let me just come in here to color, and we'll increase the saturation and the vibrance. The reason I'm doing this is really to show you the so we can have two different images and you can really see that. All right, don't take this as like some great over the top edit, because it's not. All right, but this is what we came into Luminar Neo with the basic edit straight out of ON1, and this is what we've done inside of Luminar Neo. Nothing over the top fancy, but it's just for the idea. So I'm going to click on disk or export, and then click on disk. Now you'll have to select where you want to save your completed version of the image from ON1, or I'm sorry, from Luminar. Getting these computer programs mixed up. But for me, I like to put it into a folder called rendered images, and then I have Luminar Neo exports, and that's where I'm going to put this particular file. All right. You put it wherever it makes sense for you to put it. But I have this still in the color space of Adobe RGB, and this time I'm exporting a JPEG. I could just export a TIFF, which is fine. Whatever version or style that you want to export, or format, I should say, then you could do that. So I'm going to hit save, and what it's going to do is think itself through and export. Nothing fancy here, but I'll jump over to ON1 once this is done exporting. So now that the file is done exporting, we're back inside of ON1, and I have the file selected that I want to actually lay this over with and get the same workflow essentially that I would have if the plugin feature was working. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click this to open it up inside of the edit module. All right, so now we're inside of the edit module, and the rest of this is really fairly straightforward. All I'm going to do is open the edited version of the image as a layer inside of ON1. And to do that, all I have to do is hit this little plus icon, and it's going to give me the folder where, or it's going to give me a folder browsing system essentially. Now, what you will have to do is navigate to your folder where your image is saved. I personally have already done that, but if I hit this little drop down chevron, I'll get a list here in a second. So I have this list available to me, and you can see I'm in my FWP photo hard drive. That makes sense to me, at least. And then the folder render images. And then I'm in the Luminar Neo exports folder. That's where these two images that are on screen are actually saved. And so all I have to do is select the image that I want to add into my project, which is this .tiff file. And then I'm going to click add as layer. ON1's going to read that off of the hard drive and pull it in as a layer over in my layer stack. Now, keep in mind, whenever you have layers in ON1, the final version of your file turns into a .on1 file. And what that means is you are going to have more data. Think of it as a PSD document, but specifically for ON1. Okay, so make sure you got hard drive space is what I'm really getting at. All right. Now, with that being said, I have the original image, which I'm showing you right now. And then if I turn this back on, this is the file that came straight out of Luminar Neo. Now, what I can do is just blend this in. And this is essentially where you would be if your layer filters, and then I was able to click on Luminar Neo here. If that had worked, this is essentially where I would be again. And I can edit this however I want to or need to, and all is well. Now, if you want to combine the two looks and continue editing, what I recommend you do, we'll say something like this looks about appropriate. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to come down to the bottom where it says new stamped layer. Now, if you've ever worked in Photoshop or Affinity Photo, a stamped layer essentially takes these two layers and it combines them into one, but it preserves all of the layers. So that way, if you need to go back and make tweaks, you can do that on the original layers and then restamp it. So that way you have a merged version without losing all of your data. This is really, really helpful for those who like to work non-destructively. But just know the more layers that you add into your .on1 file, it is going to increase the file size and potentially impact the performance of your computer. I experienced that. That's just my computer. Got to get a new one. All right, so now I have my stamped layer. You can see I actually have a few layers. Let me just make this a little bit larger. You can see I have a few layers here. And what I do, for me to stay organized, I like to rename my layers. If I could spell, bam, just like that, stamped layer, right? And now what that allows me to do is whenever I apply an effect to this particular stamped layer version, then it's going to apply it to all of them. I don't need these versions anymore, at least activate it. But if I hit add filter, and one of the things that I've been enjoying lately is adding in a film grain and just kind of pulling up on the size to give this like grittiness, if you will, gritty look. I may even want to come in here and add in, let's go with a glow. I think glows are pretty cool. And I'm impacting the entire image. Now, I personally like working with masking inside of ON1 versus Luminar Neo. Didn't mean to pull that down. Let's see here. What else can we do? Maybe we'll add in, you know what? Let's add in a vignette. Now, I normally do my vignettes using a local adjustment, but we can do vignettes just like this. And I think that this looks pretty good overall. And maybe what we'll do is add in a color enhancer. We'll go ahead and pull this down under here. And then what I'm going to do is use a color range mask, because again, this is one of the things that I enjoy doing inside of ON1. And so I'm just going to click color range, grab my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to click somewhere where I think it will select well. We'll come back over to masking and we'll refine this range to only the flowers there. Hit the letter O, and I'm going to invert this mask. So now it's selecting everything else except for the flowers in the most part. And we'll probably have to clean this up a little bit. But if I pull down on the saturation, we get like this color pop effect. And I think that this could be really, really cool depending on how drastically you go with it. And we may have to, like I said, refine this. So maybe pull that back up just a touch, hit the letter O, let's see where we are. So that way we can really pull this down. And this is honestly going a little bit above and beyond what I was trying to originally show. But this is the reason why I enjoy working in ON1. I just play around with the tools in here and do all kinds of things that I wouldn't really be able to do in other software, which is why I really do endorse ON1 and recommend it to pretty much everyone that I meet and they're getting into photography, or even if they're in photography, I always recommend ON1. So if you want to pick up a version of ON1 Photo Raw, consider using my discount code FreeWillPhotos20. It'll save you 20% at checkout. Now, you can also use this at the ON1 store for anything else. So if you want to pick up some ON1 extras or some kits or trainings or anything else, you can use that coupon code when you check out and it'll save you some money. All right. If you got questions about ON1 Photo Raw, moving back and forth between different applications, I showcase Luminar Neo, but what you can do with the workaround that I just showed you, you can literally go to any photo editing software, even if it's not supported as a plugin. And that's one of the benefits of having this workaround and understanding how to use it. So if you end up having a piece of software that doesn't support a plugin inside of ON1, one of the pieces of software that come to mind is Affinity Photo. I can move between ON1 to Affinity Photo and then back into ON1 if I really needed to. So hopefully you found value. If you did, smash the like button. And if you got questions, like I said, drop it in the comment section below, or you can send me an email, freewillphotos@gmail.com. Until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.